Disciplining your emotion before it disciplines you is one of the most powerful and yet most challenging tasks you will ever face in life. Emotion is not a weakness, but neither is it always your ally. In fact, left unchecked, your emotions will drag you into places your rational mind knows you don't belong. When you invest in someone deeply, when you give your time, energy, affection, and care, and that person begins to withdraw, or worse, treat your effort with indifference, your emotions flare. You feel confusion, frustration, sorrow, even desperation. The natural instinct is to fix it, to talk through it, to ask why, to explain yourself. That's understandable, it's human, but it's also dangerous. Because when you begin acting from emotional compulsion rather than principled clarity, you surrender your strength. You must learn to master the gap between stimulus and response. When she begins to treat you like your effort is ordinary, like your presence is disposable, like your love is convenient rather than valued, you have a choice. You can react or you can rise. Reacting feels right in the moment, sending that final text, trying to prove your worth, begging for a second chance to be seen. These feel like actions, but they are not. They are emotional reflexes that slowly erode your self-respect. They don't bring clarity, they cloud it. What brings clarity is silence. What brings strength is discipline, to not react when everything in you wants to scream is not passive, it's powerful. The deeper truth is that trying to convince someone to value you rarely works. If they could not see your worth when it was offered freely, they will not suddenly understand it just because you explain it in a dozen different ways. Words become background noise when they are not sought. But silence, that's different. Silence forces someone to face what they ignored. And for you, silence is not just an act of communication, it's a method of emotional regulation. It's a way to reclaim control over yourself. Because what you are really doing is not punishing her with your silence, you're saving yourself from the slow death of your own self-worth. When you begin to discipline your emotions, you start becoming aware of how much they were in control before. You start to see how much of your time was spent in reaction, how much of your value was handed over hoping someone else would validate it. That is no way to live. That is no foundation for any relationship, romantic or otherwise. You're not here to be tolerated. You're not here to beg for emotional crumbs. You're here to build something of value. And that starts with valuing yourself enough to step away when your effort is not appreciated. Now, discipline is not suppression. Don't confuse the two. Suppressing your emotions means denying they exist, pretending you're fine when that's not strength, that's denial. Discipline is different. It's acknowledging what you feel without being ruled by it. It's admitting you're hurt, angry, disappointed, but not letting that pain define your actions. Instead, you choose your next move consciously. You sit with the feeling, you understand it, and then you act from principle, not pain. And the principle is this: you matter, your energy matters, your peace matters. You don't need to beg for someone to recognize that. The moment you find yourself doing so, that's the moment you need to pause and reflect. Not on how to make her understand, but on why you're giving someone the power to question your value. That pause, that breath, that silence, it's where strength begins. It's where clarity enters. And it's in that space that you find your way back to yourself. There's something incredibly powerful about the man who doesn't flinch under emotional pressure, who doesn't need to be heard to feel validated, who doesn't chase what walks away, not because he's cold, not because he's heartless, but because he knows what he brings to the table, and refuses to spend his life convincing others of it. He walks not because he doesn't care, but because he cares too much to stay where he's not respected. So when the storm comes, when your heart aches, when your hands want to reach out, and your mind wants to explain one more time, pause, breathe. Let the wave of emotion rise and fall. Let it teach you, but do not let it command you. This is the moment you build inner strength. This is the moment you transform pain into purpose. And this is the moment, above all else, that you choose yourself. Not in anger, not in pride, but in disciplined peace. Your effort has value, but only when it's respected. That statement might sound obvious on the surface, but truly internalizing it takes experience, often painful experience. You spend time giving, helping, showing up, being consistent, being patient, being emotionally available. You put energy into someone, believing that if you care enough, try hard enough, love deeply enough, they'll eventually understand your worth. And maybe they do, for a time. Or maybe they never really do. Either way, what slowly begins to erode your spirit is not the exhaustion from trying. It's the subtle realization that your effort is being taken for granted. What you need to understand is that your energy, your presence, your loyalty, these are all finite resources. They're not things to throw into a black hole. They are investments. And like any wise investor, you must learn to evaluate where your effort is going. If someone continues to receive all the best parts of you, your time, your thoughts, your love, and offers inconsistency, disregard, or entitlement in return, that's not a partnership. That's emotional labor being exploited under the illusion of love. You cannot keep pouring into someone who makes you feel like your effort is a burden. That's a one-sided transaction, and one-sided transactions always bankrupt the giver. Effort only holds meaning in the presence of mutual respect. You cannot measure the strength of a connection solely by how much you're willing to give. True strength in relationships is found in reciprocity. It's when two people recognize each other's contributions and respond with gratitude, not with silence or coldness. When that balance is gone, your effort loses its impact. It becomes expected, not appreciated. Worse still, it becomes invisible. That is the moment you must step back and reassess, not just the other person, but yourself. You have to ask, why do I believe I have to keep trying for someone who shows no intention of meeting me halfway? That is not love. That is self-neglect disguised as commitment, and it becomes a cycle. The more you try to prove your worth, the more they feel entitled to it. You teach people how to treat you, not just by what you tolerate, but by what you continue to give, even when it's no longer being seen. Eventually, the problem isn't just them overlooking your effort. It's you undervaluing yourself enough to keep giving it away freely to someone who hasn't earned it. There's a difference between fighting for someone and exhausting yourself. Force one is rooted in mutual care and understanding. The other is driven by fear. Fear of loss, fear of not being good enough, fear of what it says about you if you finally let go. But letting go doesn't mean you failed. It means you finally recognize that no amount of trying will create respect in someone who doesn't know how to give it. And that is not a reflection of your inadequacy. It's a reflection of their inability to receive what they're not ready or willing to value. You owe it to yourself to place your energy where it is cherished. Not just received, but cherished. You are not a placeholder. You are not someone to be kept around until they decide to wake up and appreciate you. You are someone who brings value. And the moment that value is no longer recognized, your presence is no longer an offering. It's a disservice to your own growth. You do not prove your worth by staying longer. You prove it by knowing when to walk away. The hard truth is that some people will only begin to understand what you meant to them after you've stopped showing up. Your absence will do what your constant presence never could. Make them reflect, not because you played games, but because you finally decided to stop playing yourself. That shift from trying to be enough for them to being enough for yourself is where transformation begins. This is not about becoming cold or withholding love. It's about protecting your energy. It's about building a life where your effort is matched, where your heart is safe, where your giving nature is not taken as weakness but as strength. You can be kind and still have boundaries. You can be loving and still choose yourself. And you can stop trying not out of anger, but out of deep respect for what your effort actually means. Because once you learn to respect your own energy, you'll never again waste it on someone who does. Absence forces reflection far more than presence ever will. There is something uniquely powerful about stepping back, about removing yourself from a situation where you were once consistent, available, emotionally invested. It creates a space that demands to be noticed. When you're always there, always responding, always giving, always trying, it becomes easy for others to assume your presence is guaranteed. That assumption breeds complacency. And complacency is where relationships quietly begin to decay. People don't value what they think they'll never lose. Your consistent presence, when unappreciated, becomes background noise, familiar, predictable, expected. And the human mind has a tendency to ignore what it believes will always be there. But when you stop showing up, when you remove your energy, your attention, your affection, something shifts. The silence that follows becomes louder than anything you ever said. It becomes impossible to ignore. The mind begins to fill in the blanks. The questions start to rise. Why did they stop trying? Why aren't they reaching out? Did I take them for granted? Those questions create a mirror, and that mirror reflects more truth than any spoken confrontation could. In your absence, they are finally left alone with the reality of what you brought to the table. And for many, that realization is both haunting and humbling. What you need to understand is that your presence is a gift, not a given. The time you offer, the care you invest, the loyalty you bring, these are not small things. They are not to be handed out endlessly to those who do not reciprocate them. When you walk away, you are not disappearing in bitterness. You are giving space for reflection to do what words could not. You are creating a silence that forces introspection. That silence says, I am no longer available to be ignored. I am no longer placing myself where I am not seen. It is not a punishment, it is a boundary, a quiet but firm declaration of self-respect. You may have spent days, weeks, months trying to communicate your needs, your hurt, your confusion. You may have poured your heart out trying to make them understand your love, your loyalty, your effort, and yet all of that was filtered through their current perspective, one in which you were always there, no matter what. When someone believes your love is unconditional to the point of self-sacrifice, they stop listening. They assume you'll stay. That no matter how poorly they respond, how distant they grow, how careless they become with your feelings, you will still be there tomorrow, trying. That's why absence is so powerful. It interrupts the story they've been telling themselves. It forces them to rewrite the narrative. And more importantly, it places responsibility back where it belongs, with them. They can no longer blame you for trying too hard, for being emotional, for asking for more. Now they are faced with their own silence, their own choices, their own contribution to the loss of what they thought would never leave. That's when the real reflection begins. Not when you're pleading to be heard, but when your voice is no longer present. And during that silence, something important happens for you too. You begin to hear yourself again. Without the noise of their avoidance or indifference, you begin to remember your own value. You start to feel the strength in your solitude. You begin to understand that your peace matters more than their validation. You realize that walking away was not about making them miss you. It was about reclaiming the parts of yourself that you kept giving away in the hope that they would finally see you. And as that clarity sets in, you grow stronger. You heal. You no longer need them to come back and recognize your worth because you've already begun to recognize it yourself. There's nothing manipulative about stepping back from someone who does not appreciate you. It's not a game. It's not emotional warfare. It's maturity. It's the recognition that your time, your energy, your emotional investment, they're not infinite. And they should not be spent endlessly in one direction. Letting someone experience your absence is not about causing pain. It's about allowing reality to speak louder than emotion, because sometimes the most impactful message you can send is no message at all. So if they wonder why you stopped trying, let them. If they replay old conversations, revisit old texts, and question where it all changed, let them. That wondering is theirs to wrestle with. Your work now is not to explain yourself, not to justify the silence, but to keep moving forward in truth and strength. Let your absence speak. Let it echo in the spaces where your presence used to live. And most of all, let it remind you that the person who finally chose to walk away out of self-respect was the strongest version of you yet. Build a life so strong that silence is your statement. In a world where people are constantly explaining, reacting, defending, and trying to be understood, there is immense power in quiet confidence. Not the kind of silence that comes from fear or avoidance, but the kind that grows from inner strength. The kind that speaks without noise. You don't have to shout your worth. You don't have to chase after anyone to prove your value. You don't need to scream into the void hoping to be seen. If someone didn't respect you when you were giving your best, they won't understand your worth when you beg for their attention. What will truly shake them, what will stay in their memory far longer than any words, is the version of you that walked away and kept walking, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. To build a life so strong that silence is enough, you must first stop looking for external validation. As long as you place your identity in someone else's recognition, you will remain in emotional debt. You will constantly measure your value by their reactions, their presence, their willingness to stay. That's not strength. That's dependence dressed up as love. True strength begins when you look inward, when you decide to build a life that reflects your standards, your goals, your values, regardless of who chooses to be part of it. It means filling your time with purpose instead of longing. It means finding fulfillment not in attention, but in alignment with your principles, your growth, your future. You don't rebuild your life by waiting for someone to return. You rebuild by moving forward in such a deliberate and focused way that their absence becomes irrelevant. You create something so meaningful, so fulfilling, that the silence between you and them is no longer a void. It's a boundary. And that boundary is not there to punish, it's there to protect. It guards the version of you that refused to settle for being tolerated when you deserve to be valued. That kind of boundary doesn't require explanation. It doesn't come with a speech or a long list of reasons. It comes with action, with presence, with quiet elevation. The truth is, people will notice your absence more when you start shining without them, When you are constantly explaining, constantly trying to hold things together, they might have overlooked your effort. But when they see you thriving in your own space, when they see that your world didn't fall apart when they left, but actually got clearer, sharper, more meaningful, that's when they begin to reflect. That's when your silence speaks louder than anything you ever said. Not because you're trying to make them miss you, but because you finally stopped trying to be heard and started focusing on becoming whole. You build this life of strength not with anger, but with discipline. You wake up and you put in the work on yourself, your health, your mind, your mission. You stop checking for their messages. Stop waiting for closure. Stop feeding the hope that they'll finally understand. You realize that closure doesn't come from them. It comes from within. It comes the moment you accept that you cannot force someone to value what they're not ready to recognize. And that realization, while painful, frees you. It allows you to stop chasing ghosts and start building something real. Let your silence be filled with purpose. Fill the space they used to occupy with progress. Let your actions, not your explanations, show the world who you are. Become so focused on your growth that looking back feels like a distraction. Let your peace be louder than your pain. Let your composure carry more weight than This is how you shift the power back to yourself, not by playing games, but by raising your standards and refusing to break them just to keep someone around. Eventually, those who took you for granted may look back. They may feel the weight of your silence. They may finally understand the cost of losing someone who gave so much. But by then, you won't be waiting for that realization. You'll be too far ahead, too invested in the life you built to be pulled back into the past. That is the true victory, not making someone regret losing you, but reaching a place where their regret no longer defines you. A life that speaks for itself, in quiet strength and unwavering direction, is the loudest statement you'll ever need to make.